Hello and welcome to another episode of Needle Stack. I'm one of your hosts, AJ Nash. I've got a long history in intelligence, worked in a bunch of agencies. I've been in the private sector about 10 years. I basically build intel programs, help people do that, do a lot of advisory work. This is my life, and I love it. And I'm joined by, obviously, Rob Vamosi. Rob, you want to give him the story?
Yeah, so I'm a journalist by training, but I've fallen into the security field and spent the last 20 years doing that. I've written 2 books. I feel very strongly about information and misinformation. So AJ and I are going to have a conversation about how analysts approach some of the AI slop that's coming out and so easy to produce. How do you field it and how do you work through all of that?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this discussion, to be honest. So as anybody who's watched the show or listened to the show for a while probably knows, more often than not, we have guests. But every once in a while, Rob and I just like to get together and talk about a topic that maybe we didn't have a good guest for, or maybe we want to put somebody on the spot on, or maybe we wanted some quiet time to ourselves. I don't know. And today's a really good one, I think, because, I've spent a lot of time over the last few years talking about, this threat of a post-truth world, right? That we've seen this rise in misdis and malinformation. And then the technologies have gone along with this. You get into generative AI and how much easier it is to be dishonest, frankly, really dishonest in a very convincing way. And so, and then AI slop came up and Rob said, hey, we should talk about this. And I thought you were right, man. I thought this was a good idea. So I'm excited to get into it and talk about it from an intel analyst standpoint, which is where I live, from a journalist standpoint, where you live. I think where they come together is that we both care about the truth, right? It's important to make sure that people understand what the truth is and how to separate fact from fiction, because all of our decisions still have to start with, is this real, right? So, do you want to talk a little bit about what we're talking about when we talk about AI slop first, so people know?
Yeah, what sparked my interest in this was OpenAI came out with a new and better way of generating video content. And you go back a couple years ago and you would type like fluffy bunny in a field of flowers and you'd get back this pixelated image that was close to what you wanted and you could work with it. It was clear that it was AI generated. And then with this new release, I think it's Sora 2, somebody played with it and said, what if Sam Altman went into Target and was arrested for shoplifting? And I watched the video. It was short, but nonetheless, the quality was high enough that if you were glancing and it was on a monitor somewhere, you go like, oh, this is bad. Sam Altman just got arrested. It's like, how do you differentiate between that was AI generated and did not happen versus something that really did happen?
Yeah, I saw some videos when they were first testing out this concept at the next layer here. I saw one that was a car show, if I remember correctly. It was supposed to be a whole bunch of people at a different car show, and it was a 2 or 3 minute video, and it was really good. I'm not going to lie to you. There were parts of it where I would not have known. And as you said, again, if you're staring at it on your screen or your phone, and you're taking the time to rewind and fast forward and look through it. But most things we see are coming from a distance, right? It's on a TV screen someplace in a corner of a room somewhere, an office or whatever it might be, a waiting room. Things are passing by really quickly. You don't have time for that. And visuals have a huge impact on how we see the world, how we believe the world to exist, right? If you see a quick headline, you see a quick video with it and you move on, and then you go, man, did you see that thing earlier today? And the person you're telling it to doesn't know anything about it. And they're like, what? And 2 or 3 more of those happen. And now you've got a whole bunch of people that are sharing this misinformation, not intentionally. They just saw something and were shocked by it, but nobody did the research to see what it was, right? And very quickly you start having this belief that something happened that never happened. And we have all sorts of stories in history, of this happening long before technology, right? The concept of a story getting passed around that turns out, people believe it's real and it's not. That's been around forever. You got the Mandela effect, things like that. But now there's a way to weaponize this if you want to. These technologies are super easy to use. They're inexpensive, if not free. And it creates a whole new layer of concern, for what is reality. And again, from an intel standpoint, I worry about it because, the job of intelligence is to provide the best information, the best content to the right people at the right time to make informed decisions. And it has to be timely and accurate and relevant and complete. And there's a couple other pieces that I always forget to mention. But timely is only one of those pieces, right? So we're allowed to take the time to get things right within reason. If you take too long, you've missed the opportunity to support, the decision makers. But it seems a little different in other parts of the world. Like you're in a journalism space. That's your background, right? And I remember, I'm old enough to remember, when you had two newspapers a day. You had a morning edition, you had an afternoon edition or evening edition. You had the nightly news, and that was about it, right? So if you saw something at 8 a.m., you had all day really to research it and background it, investigate it, and maybe it waited till the next day if it wasn't, something you knew enough about, right? How does it feel now? You have this 24-hour cycle. news is everywhere all the time. Plus you have social media and you have people that say they're citizen journalists, all this stuff. How does that change the pressure to jump to publishing things that maybe haven't been vetted?
Well, I guess I could say I was part of that degradation of journalism because I was at CNET, which was 24/7, and you had constant drives to feed the news cycle with whatever was happening. For me, it was like when a virus took off. I remember when the I Love You virus happened, and I was like communicating with Symantec and all the companies that were on the cutting edge of determining that this was a global problem and this was a massive issue, but also vetting it and saying, are other people seeing this before we went live with any of that information? And so that was back around 2000 or so. The other thing I saw in the newsroom was this was about the time that Osama bin Laden was issuing these videos, and they would show him in a darkened cave and, you know, people at his feet and whatever and so forth. And I had a digital forensics expert who whispered in my ear and said, I've looked at those and those are not real. I can tell he's sitting in front of a green screen. The lighting is off, this, that, and the other thing. We're talking early 2000s that we were seeing this type of misinformation being fed and news services going with it and saying, you know, this is official video, whatever, and so forth. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, well, no, actually, if you spend a few moments thinking about it, this all falls apart. Now, going forward to what you just said, the auto show. I have seen that clip as well. And the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, it's an auto show. They actually identified people as being at the show, either somebody who was a product marketing manager or somebody who was just visiting and saying, I want to buy this new car and whatever. They had names, they had backgrounds on them and so forth. You go back and you rewatch it. And only then do you notice the disembodied head in the background floating in the crowd. And
yeah, I remember that.
Random stuff that the AI doesn't necessarily know and understand. Mm-hmm. You say, create a crowd, and it just populates it. But it doesn't quite understand the articulation of the human body to the point where it can do like 20 or 30 different people randomly moving in the background. So it's only on second or third viewing that it becomes clear. Now, here's the thing, both in journalism and in your world, you have to make a decision on the spot. You see something and it's like, we should go live with this. And it's like, hold on. We got to vet it first. That is a problem, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there often isn't a second or third viewing, right? And then there's pressures, you know, to get things to move quickly. Now, you know, in the intel space, at least in the government intel space, usually, not always, the pressures are a little bit less. It is important to get it right. Most people know that. And obviously, if you're war fighting, if things are happening in real time, it is important to move with a pace. But people want to get it right. You know, intel professionals, years and years of experience, know bad intel is better than no intel. You don't want to send somebody down the wrong path. You don't want to send somebody, you know, drop bombs on the wrong targets, et cetera. So you're allowed to have that second look. Normally in intelligence, even if you're first line analyst, there's somebody taking a look at. There's a peer review, there's a senior review, there's another layer. So somebody will get that second look because of how important it is. Because listen, we're talking bombs on targets and, you know, and bullets in bodies again. So there's that, right? But you get into the private sector or say journalism, there often isn't that second look. It's there and it's out and it's gone. And then you go, oh gosh, you know, you look back and you think, oh man, maybe that shouldn't have gone. Good luck with a retraction. You know, I know that's a tried and true method. You know, hey, we made a mistake, and everybody's entitled to mistakes. Don't get me wrong. Journalism, like every other industry, mistakes happen. But retractions are, in my opinion, I love your opinion as an expert, are almost useless at this point because people are so quick to move things. They got it, they consumed it, they moved on. They may or may not even consume the retraction. If they do, it's far enough down the road. They've forgotten what they consumed to begin with. Our brains aren't set up in a way that we consume things and categorize them and keep track of what the source was. We divorce the source from the content in our brains. And all the content gets melded together and has some equality to it in whether the sources were good or bad. That's just how the brain works, how we think. Unless you sit down and actually categorize things back out manually and have a chance to go back and look and review, you just remember what you remember and you don't remember where it came from. And those retractions don't seem to do a lot of value. And there just seems to be this push to move things faster and faster because there's competition. There's money involved, right? You got to get the clicks, you got to get the views, you got to stay up there, right? So whether it's true or not, sometimes feels like it's no, but not even you're not trying to manipulate. It's just like, well, it looks good enough. Let's go with it and see what happens. And those things go viral and they just don't seem to come back once they do.
So you had a point when we were back in the world of newspapers that came out twice a day and the evening news was on at 6 o'clock. You had captive audiences. And so when you issued a retraction, that audience probably saw the retraction because it came in the afternoon edition of the newspaper. And they were like, oh, that thing this morning, that's not true or whatever. The problem today is that there's that old saying, you can't unsee something. And so you see a video that is just quite, whatever. And then you find out later it was all artificial intelligence. It's not real. It didn't happen. It's kind of hard to unwind that. And to your point, there's so many different sources of input today. I'm not going to call it news. So many sources of input that you miss the retraction. You miss the walking back of this piece of information because you're no longer a dedicated viewer of that one channel. And then things go viral. And you've got this other problem, which is like low information people that basically only look at, I'm going to pick on TikTok, but one source of social media and not anything else to vet whether what they're watching and what they're seeing is true, because the algorithm now is another issue there where it's going to go, hey, people are responding to this. I'm going to keep going. And then you're like, no, it's false.
Two really good points there. The retraction piece, I hadn't really thought about why retraction seemed less impactful now. And I think you hit it on the head is, I'm consuming from 52 different sources, right? Maybe that retraction comes from the source, but I may not get back to that source in days or weeks or whatever. The timeliness was different. As you said, if I'm a subscriber to a specific newspaper, I watch a specific news program, I watch it in the morning, I watch it again at night, or I read in the morning, read at night. That retraction's in the same spot, right? I'm going to see it. I'm going to connect it. I probably haven't told 1,000 people yet either, by the way, because whatever I read in the morning news, I went to work. Maybe I had a conversation with 2 or 3 coworkers and my day was, resolved. And that night it was a retraction. The next day I go, oh, hey, Bob, I was wrong about that thing. They reported it wrong. Now somebody sees something and they go, oh my goodness. And they rush to social media and they tell 62,000 people and those people all tell other people and it's gone. And it's just gone. The retraction doesn't matter. Even if I came out the next day and said, hey, what I said yesterday was wrong. I got it from the source. They were wrong. Nobody read that. Like it's certainly not the same people are going to read it. So it's just gone. It's just out there forever, and you can't get these things back. And the speed at which this happens is just remarkable. And it makes it very difficult to keep track of, what's real, what's not real, whether it's intentional or unintentional, sometimes doesn't even matter anymore. But obviously when there's malice involved, that makes it even worse. And there's a lot of that out there. So you've got people that are putting things out knowingly. They're creating these false images, these false messages and putting them out and creating these stories that you can't undo. I've had more arguments with people about things that are just based on simple facts than I care to recall now. And I'm frustrated to find out that facts don't win arguments anymore. It's very hard to dissuade somebody. As you said, once you've seen it, you've believed it, it's real to you, right? It's very hard to explain to somebody not to believe their lying eyes, so to speak. But it's not their eyes that are lying. It's the thing that they consumed. And it's very, very difficult. And I can't, I burn way too much time and energy, quite frankly, on social media, if anybody knows me, trying to convince people of what's real. Which I feel like is a failing argument nowadays, but it seems so incredibly important too. If we lose track of what's real, then we're all going to be manipulated by whatever we're consuming, and we live in different worlds at that point. It's very dangerous.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time in social media as well, and I try to boost stuff that I feel has been vetted. But I have retracted things. And the way you do that is just to sort of unboost that post because now it's false. But how many people have that diligence to be on top of it or care? I mean, I'm coming from a journalism background where, did you get 2 sources? Did you confirm, et cetera, et cetera? And I hate being wrong. And having published 2 books, I would lie awake before that book was published and be like, somebody's going to find the error that I made or errors that I made in the book. And it was only after like 6 months of it being out there and people reading it that I feel like, whew, I actually footnoted everything. I actually got everything right. So.
No, it's a good point. I had somebody ask me the other day, a buddy of mine, he poked at me. He said, why are you arguing with this bot? Right. Because I'll do that occasionally. People are like, why would you argue with bots on social media platforms? And I recognize that. And I said to him, listen, I'm not arguing with the bot. I mean, it looks that way, but I recognize that others are going to follow that bot or listen to what's being reported. And it's all crap. I said, my hope is I'm injecting truth in there. So somebody who reads that also sees the truth. I know I'm not going to change the opinion of the bot or the troll that I'm talking to. That's not part of the plan. But I think if we all just give up and say, well, those are all bots and trolls, just ignore it. The problem is a lot of people don't ignore it and it just continues to perpetuate these stories that aren't real. And you need people who are going to go in and fight back, push back, with truth, with facts, with logic. I have found, I have to admit, I've been cheating lately, and it's worked out nicely for me. On Twitter, Grok. Grok can actually be a really nice tool to have now. So when somebody says something that's just far out there, I often just say, "Hey, Grok, can you?" And I repeat the question or whatever. And then I've actually recently, I was funny enough, I had a situation where it was obviously a troll I was talking to, and I let Grok fact check the troll. I went away. I went on with the rest of my life. I came back later and I had like 45 unread things. It was the troll and the Grok arguing back and forth with each other all the way through. And it was fun to watch. I was like, oh, here's a whole bunch of time I just saved. And anybody reading this can see all this back and forth. And I was like, this is actually kind of a good use for Grok. Now, of course, Grok, I worry that eventually it'll be, bastardized and it won't give right answers. And then I have to fight with Grok, which I don't want to be doing with my free time. But I am finding I try really hard to push back. Like you said, there's that ethics to this. I want things to be accurate. I've retracted things. I've deleted things. When I've been wrong, it happens to everybody. We're going to be wrong occasionally. But there aren't enough people, I think, care about the ethics part. And I don't think enough people have the time, energy, or devotion, or should probably, to be fighting back and pushing truth at clear lies. But I think that's why we're losing what truth is, right? It's very cheap and easy to create bots, troll farms and all these things out here that are just pushing out whatever the story is over and over and over again. And we don't teach critical thinking until college, at least, right? So you're not getting it junior high school or high school. We're unleashing social media on people at very, very young ages. And we don't unleash, for lack of a better word, the concepts of critical thinking until a decade later. That's a bit of a problem, I think, that we have people that are just out there that don't know how to discern fact from fiction. And there's plenty that will take advantage of that. So I don't know what your thoughts are on, how do we improve critical thinking at younger ages and see if that might.
Yeah, part of it is also the volume. So let's separate words from images for a moment. I had a conversation over the weekend with somebody about how can I tell if something's been written by AI? And I said, for me, it's pretty easy because there are certain verbs that are reused over and over. It's like, dude, get a thesaurus or something. I mean, AI, I don't know why, circle around these particular verbs. So that's a nitpick of mine. But a more obvious thing is the use of the M dash. Dash, and then something else. It's like, okay, can we either do a clause there or put a period there or whatever? But the M dash is there. And then the other thing is everything is in threes. This, that, and the other thing. It's like always. And it's like dead giveaway to me that this was written by an AI. Now, we need to get that same literacy, I think, with the visual content, because I'm sure there are tells within the visual content that we just don't have the volume yet to recognize those repetitive things, because ultimately deep down inside, it's a language learning model. And so it's taking what is already done in the past and regurgitating it and not really iterating in any clever new way. And so again, there should be some tells in the video content that in time, analysts, OSINT or journalists or anybody else should be able to flag pretty quickly, maybe not on first view, but pretty quickly that this was AI generated and not real.
Yeah. I mean, as you said, they're LLMs. It's derivative, right? Now, I think we're going to get to the point where these move past derivative and become creative. I don't know that we're there yet. I think people interpret what we see sometimes as creative because we haven't seen it before. But again, the technology, if you dig back, you'll find it's derivative. Oh, this is actually a piece was taken here and here and here, but there were 16,000 different ideas of pieces pulled together to create this thing, but none of it's real. It's and none of it's creative and new. It's a little bit like the way we dream. I read someplace that none of us actually, every face in our dreams is somebody we've seen. We aren't capable of inventing new faces, apparently. So if you're like, I don't know that person, you do. You saw them in the bus, or you saw them at the supermarket, or you know them somewhere. You saw them, you just don't realize it, right? And that's sort of how this process works. Now, I got to tell you though, it's funny you mentioned the M dash. I wrote something on this not long ago, and actually somebody else just wrote a blog on it as well. This has been a frustration of mine because I've been using the M dash for like 15 years. I'm an M dasher, And again, these are language learning models. So they were trained on something. Well, they were trained a lot on academic writings and some Intel work, a lot of structured writing, right? So I use the M dash. I write in threes. I have had people accuse me of submitting AI, and I'm like, I hate to tell you this, but you're going to have to look back at my writings from a decade ago. This has always been my style. I happen to have a very structured style that aligns really well with AI, unfortunately. So I find myself writing things and then finding out they score high as AI. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to fix that. I can make it worse. There's technologies, by the way. You can go shove stuff into technologies that'll humanize AI writing. All it does is make it terrible, by the way. It makes it unintelligible, but it won't score high as AI because it's garbage now. It just isn't English anymore. So I find myself having that challenge too of what do you do when you submit something that's authentic and somebody says, no, this is AI. It's like, I wrote it. I don't know how to fix that problem. This is how I write. I like the M dash. I will say the double M dash is sort of what AI loves to use, and mine are shorter dashes at least, so I can tell that difference. But M dashes and ellipses have always kind of been a thing for me. And so that's another challenge we're starting to run into is again, we're trying to discern fact from fiction and real from fake. What do you do when people who write are some of the structured type of writing that was used to train these LLMs? How do they not end up being accused of being, fraudulent? I work for, as most of us do, we get paid to do our job. Somebody's paying me to do work. I don't need to submit a piece of work that I've spent hours and hours on, and somebody calls it AI and says I'm defrauding the company of money. So that's a whole separate issue we have to deal with. But I think you make some good points. There are AI detection systems out there for writing, which are okay. By the way, if you check one of those and it comes up AI, don't immediately accuse that person. Like I said, some people write in structured styles. Just look for drafts or something. I think we're starting to see the same thing for the visuals. There are some technologies out there that should be helping us to detect, there's AI detectors.io and GPT-0 and originality.ai and copy leaks and some others, not to advertise for anybody. I don't work for any of these people, but there are some technologies out there. So there are people studying this and trying to do exactly what you said, trying to dig into those details and say, well, how does this compare to real and where are the structures? I won't vouch for any of those. I haven't been playing with them too much, but we're going to have to because we're seeing so much more of this. And we got to figure out how we're going to discern, like I said, fact from fiction, because the technology is getting way better. Like the videos that come out now, there's new pieces that have come out are so good. It's scary. There's a technology I work with from a company I won't mention because I work with them. And I can develop like digital doppelgangers, so you can record video and audio and pictures and whatever, and you can create yourself, and then you just give it a script and it'll create videos that are you. I haven't published any of these things yet, so anybody who's seeing me, this is still me, I promise. So far, yeah. So far. But but I worry about where that's going to go and how far we go in losing track of what's real. And in that case, is it fake? Like, listen, if I write all the script and I approved the AI that's generating a version of me that isn't live me, but is me, is that real anymore? Is that fake? Where does that fit on the scale? Because the content was real, the purpose was real. There's no intent to manipulate, but maybe I just want to use this because I can do 5 videos in a day instead of 1. I don't even know where that's going to fit on an ethical standard for us.
You talk about avatars, and great animated show called Batman Beyond years ago would have the AI generated news anchor doing the news. And I know in the newsroom, in a broadcast newsroom, there are no longer camera ops. It's all robotic. Basically, the director can manipulate everything from a dashboard. Don't need anybody in the room with the talent. Well, now the talent can be animated as well. I don't know how I feel about it, but I do feel like we're probably moving to that day where the on-air personalities would be AI generated. Because what they're doing is regurgitating something that's on a teleprompter in front of them. And why do you need a human being? Now, I just put a bunch of people out of work, and I'm really sorry about
including
that,
us, by the way.
Including us, yes. This podcast is being read off of a teleprompter.
That's
yes,
right.
Exactly.
Not yet so far.
But my point is that there may be some legitimate uses for these avatars where there is some redundancy and so forth, and it does free you up, which is all the great things that we hear about AI. It frees us up to do other things like what?
Yeah, if it frees me up enough, it's going to free me up enough to be unemployed is what it's going to do. So
right.
I guess so much
we
free
can
time.
dream up. Yeah. We can dream up whatever that new thing is, and that's probably on us then.
Right. I could be an inventor. Yeah. The problem with free time is you don't get paid for it. That's why it's called free time.
Right. But So I got into online journalism about the time that this whole thing was controversial. It's like, you go to school and you learn how to write for a publication. You've got the AP style, you got this and whatever. And I'm sitting there at CNET and we're like arguing. We have this thing called electronic mail. For a while we were doing e-mail, and finally the editor in chief was like, no, it's email, all one word, and it's lowercase e. And I was there when we were like creating some of the stuff, and it's like we're going to have to go through this again with AI in our world, where we need new words, we need new technologies. I'm not new technologies, new jobs, basically, that we all do. Which is different. And the other weird thing about that period of time was, as the internet was taking off, you had librarians being hired. Why? Because they had, the ontology skills to create the layers of pages that you would have, because the old Yahoo was very tiered like that. It's like autos, new autos, refurbished autos, it's like, and then natural language came along with Google, and it's just like, show me new cars. Boom.
Yeah, it definitely changed it. No, I think you're right. And this will spawn new jobs. Like you said, prompt engineering is a term that comes up a lot more often. I've told people I certainly wouldn't call myself a prompt engineer, but I've put a lot of time into it, as it turns out. I didn't intend to. It's just I spent a lot of time playing with these different platforms. I did an Intel drop on this not long ago, where I demoed it. And I just played with a bunch of different platforms. And you have to, because you have to figure out how to interrogate the platform to figure out what the answer is, and why the platform gave you the answer, and is it sourced, and where are those sources coming from, and where are the biases. And platforms will tell you sometimes, hey, I'm not going to do what you told me. I'm not following your instructions. I'm doing this other thing. Especially if you ask a complicated question, the platforms will admit that they take the first bits they find. AI platforms default towards timely. I mentioned timely, accurate, relevant, complete, as things in Intel. And the AI platforms will tell you ultimately they default right now to timeliness over anything else, which includes completeness, certainly includes accuracy. Because again, they're platforms. The number one job of a platform is to make sure the user keeps using it, to stay engaged. If you ask a complicated question to AI and it goes, okay, great, give me 30 minutes and I'll give you an answer, you're not engaged anymore. You've gone off and done other things. That's not good for platforms who want you to stay involved. If anybody ever plays with any of the AIs, you'll notice the minute you finish the question, one of two things happens. Either at a minimum, you get like a thinking, you get some blurb, but it won't be long. And within milliseconds, half second, a second maybe, it starts kicking out wild amounts of content, not like a sentence here or there, just boom, a whole story, right? And it may be terrible, but it has you engaged. You now have to read it. You have to decide it's terrible. You have to give it new prompts. You have to change it, etc. And every iteration is more time you're spending with the platform. And that's the point of platforms. I don't think they're ever going to be designed to just give you a perfect answer right away, because it doesn't do them any good. It's not what they're looking for. There has to be some engagement, which means there's got to be some design to keep you engaged and involved, which kind of defeats some of the purpose of the idea that this is going to make us more efficient. I know companies that are gauging efficiency, how much time are you saving on AI, and I'm like, well, I don't know how to describe that. Like, it's a good teammate for brainstorming maybe. And if I have writer's block, it might give me ideas I can work with. But a lot of things I do, I get done. And by the time it's all done with the project, I look and go, I probably could have done this myself in less time, or about the same time, and just as well. But it sure felt like I was productive the whole time through. And so there's that myth that goes with it.
Right. And often the prompts that I've had will have a follow on. Do you want me to go into greater detail about X, or do you want me to try it from the perspective of whatever? And there is that follow on. They want to keep me engaged, even though I'm using it for free and not paying them anything for the moment. But anyway, I think the other thing here is, as replacing like the anchors, as I mentioned, there's talk about Hollywood in general, like, oh, we don't need actors. We can, animate somebody, animate. And the thing is, the quality is so different. This is also going to date me, but when they moved from film to video, there was a resolution difference. I could tell it was on video. I could tell it was shot on film. I think the same thing is true here. Reality has been degraded in the AI world. And when you look at it, it doesn't have the verisimilitude. It doesn't have all the random shit that goes on in the real world.
Well, hold on a second. That was like a 75-cent word. Verisimilitude. I got a pretty good vocabulary, but I'm not going to lie. I don't know verisimilitude. I'm going to need you to help me with that one. That's a hell of a word. I got to learn this.
All the varied things that are going on around you. It's
all right. So it doesn't have all the variations that you're talking about. I get it. Okay, keep going.
Directors, of course, like to control the scene. It's called mise en scène and whatever, so that you have clues in the scene as to what you're saying. But what I'm seeing are these videos of people like going into a sandwich shop and buying a sandwich or whatever, and it's animated with AI, and it doesn't have the random stuff going on in the background that is real world. It doesn't have the texture and the quality that you'd expect, and that's why you see some people going between video and going back to film. You know, it's like, we shot this whole movie on actual film, and it's like, whoa. And you want to go to the theater to see that because the colors are more vibrant, because it's just a richer experience. And I think there'll always be a need for that, the creative stuff, but maybe there's quick and dirty with the AI stuff. So back to the analysts world. It's like, do you think they'll rise to that level where they can detect, like, this is not reality? This is something that was composted together?
I think it's a good question. I think it's like any arms race, right? The technologies are going to be battling. There's going to be companies that are making better and better and more high quality, convincing, artificial audio and video and text. And then there's going to be companies that are trying to build the technologies to identify them. I wouldn't be shocked if some of them are the same companies. It's a pretty good business model to create a problem and create the solution and sell both of them. It's a smart way to do business. So I'd be interested to see who's investing in these companies. I won't be surprised if we find VCs that are on both sides of this. And, that's a pretty good way of making a business. It's interesting. You mentioned, the change from video to film, right? Or from film to video, I should say. I remember the same discussions on the audio side, when people moved from records to CDs. I know people who still absolutely prefer records. Now, CD is very clean, right? You get rid of all the pops and the crackles, whatever. But it also is a little less authentic, right? And there are people who are audiophiles who, and I don't have a phonograph. I don't do this. But I understand the difference. I understand the passion for it. And I wonder if we won't start seeing some of that as we see more of this AI develop. And I think you're right. I think some low-hanging fruit will happen. I think we'll see, video take over some news broadcasts, things like that. Where now you can have a whole broadcast done in 12 minutes. We can do one every hour, every half hour, whatever. It doesn't have to have people. But I think there's also going to be a pushback. I think we're hopefully starting to see it already, of people saying, you know what, I've had enough of the AI. Like I remember we've had this for years in just like, customer service phone calls, things like that. I want to talk to a person, right? And I'm at that age now. I get on the call and I just keep hitting 0 until they finally give me a human being. Like, I just don't care about the system, and I'm done arguing with AIs about it. I think we'll see some of that too, where people are like, I don't want my news from AI. I want a human perspective. I want these kind of conversations. Like you've seen it. I know we talked about it off this show that, there's AI now that can produce whole podcasts. Notebook LM, for anybody who's curious, you give it a bunch of content, tell it to kick out a podcast. It'll kick 2 talking heads out, kind of like us. It's not great. It's not bad if you just want to learn something. It's a quick way to learn things. It's like Cliff Notes on audio, but it doesn't feel like a good conversation or a real podcast or anything. And there's no engagement to it. And I'm hopeful that we're going to see some push there, because ultimately a lot of things just come down to the market. We're a capitalist society, and whatever sells, companies want to do this because it's cheaper, it's faster, it's lower overhead. If people will buy it, people will pay the advertising, et cetera, that goes with it. Hey, we're going to keep pushing it this way. But I think we're going to see some pushback. I think people still want the authenticity. They want to be able to trust. From an Intel standpoint, how are we going to determine it? I think it's an ever-present problem. I think in Intel, we've had to deal with this for a long time from a human standpoint. There's misinformation, disinformation, malinformation has been intentional for generations. If you're in the SIGINT world, which is where I grew up, you listen to adversaries. And part of the discussion is determining, do we think this is valid? Was this real? Was this happening? Are they pushing this content because they think they're being listened to? There's always been a lot of that push and pull and back and forth and analysis that goes with it. So I think there'll still be some of that, and going through the analytic process to say, does this make sense? Let's talk about, competing hypotheses. Let's talk about some other structured analytic techniques to determine if this holds up. What I tell people in my life privately basically is, hey, listen, if you read something or saw something and it was just truly shocking to you, immediately start questioning it, because maybe that was intentional. They targeted you with a thing they knew would shock you, because the things we're most shocked about, or most excited about for that matter, if it's good too, are the things we spread the fastest. So if it's something that really evokes some huge emotion in you, whether it's anger or fear or sadness or happiness or whatever it is, that's the thing that's really worth taking a second or third look at, because that's the thing you're going to push the fastest and the farthest. If it's mundane, nobody cares. Nobody's going to really work much on the mundane. So I tell people the more emotionally involved you are in the thing you're consuming, it's the more critical we need to take a look at that thing as just kind of a guideline, and double and triple check it and look for other sources. But then we get into the discussion of what is a valid source, which is very much open for debate now, on what's valid. But I think those are big pieces that we need to work through.
I think that's always been a discussion, even when we were in print. You go to the library and it only has 2 books on a subject. Is that enough to really feel like you've encompassed the subject? And then you find out later that one of the books was, a biased text by somebody who has an axe to grind. And it's like, okay, now you've got a skewed view. So we've always had this problem. It's just become magnified because of the convenience. I can pick up my phone and look at several different social media channels and get flooded with misinformation if I'm not careful. To your point, I follow journalists, I follow individuals because it's their integrity, whether or not they will accept that is on the line, in my opinion. Their publication might say otherwise and rewrite, in most cases, headlines and so forth to skew the news a bit for whatever purpose. But I feel that the journalists are communicating pretty accurately in social media, and a lot of them have left commercial businesses and are doing their own on Substack and other places like that. And so it's incumbent on me to do that extra work, and it's kind of a pain. But I think more and more people will start to do that because, as you said, they're going to hunger for the humanity of all of this and not the regurgitated 30-second sound bites that we're getting right now and living through. I think this is a learning curve. It's like we're being flooded with it, and we're going to somehow figure out defenses against it, whether those are natural and they rise from the fact that we just don't like it, or to the point where we start regulating and saying, no, you've exceeded your bullshit quota for today, and you can't post any more bullshit until tomorrow. It's just the way it works.
Well, it's a couple of things you mentioned that I think are interesting, and I think they tie back to how we do things in the intel world. So you talked about, you're going to write a piece and there's only 2 books. Is that enough content, to support, whatever you're going to put together, right? And then you find out later one of those books might even be, flawed in itself. So in the intel world, the big advantage we've always had on this, because we do the same thing. We do research, and you've got to pull as many sources together as you can. You have to vet those sources. But we have these confidence languages, that people talk about, caveat language and confidence ratings. So possible, probable, more likely, less likely, and so I've had a lot of time to try, perhaps unsuccessfully, to educate some people in the private sector about what these terms mean. Intelligence Community Directives 203, 206, 208, they're publicly available. Anybody wants to take time to read them? They're short, they're sweet, and they'll tell you a whole story here. But it's really important to understand when the government says, we have a high confidence assessment or a low confidence assessment, that's telling you a lot more information than you realize on how many sources and how confident we are in those sources. If I give you a low confidence assessment on XYZ, don't run and do anything with that. Like, it's informational still at this point. It may well be true, but we're telling you up front, we don't know. We don't have a lot of great sources on it. They aren't well vetted. It's important enough we felt we had to say something, but we're not in a position to necessarily act on that thing. High confidence assessment based on a large body of evidence is a whole different thing. That's a lot of sources that have been vetted and are trusted. And it's very likely that what we're saying in that assessment is going to be accurate. It certainly is to the best of our knowledge in the moment. And those things matter, and those things don't translate in the private sector. People don't talk in that way in the private sector. In fact, they talk very much the opposite. I learned, when I would write assessments, and I worked for companies, and we'd go to marketing, and they'd say, well, yeah, you say you have low confidence. Can we just wipe that part out and just say, this happened? I'm like, no, we can't. And then you have to explain it's not their fault. Like, but if you say something low confidence, like, well, it doesn't really pop. It's not exciting. It's not going to drive people. I'm like, well, that's not my job. My job is to tell people the truth, not to get them excited to drive them someplace. And so finding that balance, it's not that the marketing folks were trying to be dishonest. They're trying to do their job, which is to, get clicks and drive people forward and what goes with it. It's just explaining this huge translation between, confidence ratings. And I know journalism does a lot of the same thing when you guys talk about your sources to the best you can, whether it's a vetted source, whether it's a reliable, trusted source, et cetera. Same concept. And I think that gets lost. And then the other piece you mentioned was how quickly things get out and about and figure out sources. There's this thing called circular reporting, which also is incredibly powerful. We talk about in the intelligence community over and over again. Just because you read something 30 times doesn't mean you actually have 30 sources. And that happens way more now than it used to. It used to be if you read it, it was in a newspaper, and maybe you'd find out, hey, this was AP, it hit the wire. So, there's 7 newspapers, but they're all saying the exact same story. And you can see that it's word for word. It's really just AP. That's one source, not 7. Well, now we have it going everywhere. Things go viral. It's social media. People even hide the original source. They don't quote the original source. They act like they are the source. And so you find people setting up, beliefs and reporting on things. You go, when you dig in, you go, this is all exactly the same. This is all one source. Oh, and by the way, that one source was somebody's Facebook page. Like you go all the way back and realize there's nothing here. There's no underpinnings to this really powerful opinion, because again, there's not journalistic integrity is not a requirement for citizens, that are just acting as journalists. And so it's important to dig through and find out what your real source is and how close they were to the actual subject matter and how reliable they are. And again, at the speed we go with, it just doesn't happen. And when people read it 6, 7, 8 times, they're more likely to believe it without checking, going, well, it's actually, you're reading the same thing. It's just 6, 7, 7 times, but it's all republished. So, I mean, those are huge concerns that I think you were talking about in there.
It is. And the algorithm rewards that behavior. If you get upset over something and you try to argue facts, they love it because that's engagement, that's clicks, that's time spent on their platform, et cetera, et cetera. I think the problem that I feel that we're dealing with is people don't have time to listen to facts. And to your point, they don't have critical thinking in school. And so logic is out the window. Someone told me you can't logic somebody into the truth if they're basing it on illogic to begin with. And it's like, this is kind of a fundamental place where we are right now. What I am seeing, and I look to the political sector for this because it's kind of interesting how this is working out. There are some candidates now that are distilling truth. And I don't mean that in the social media way. I mean, literally coming up with the right words succinctly to say in a short 30-second soundbite or a phrase, a lot of facts, and they're getting better at it. And I think this is kind of where we're maybe moving, is that, you're using juvenile words. I'm using impactful words that deliver a message. And when you walk away, you go, oh, wow, what he just said was really cool. And I think we're seeing an evolution in that political space that will also happen in other spaces as well. It'll become, how can you deliver dense fact information in a short, pithy statement? It's something I'm personally working on myself. It's like, how can I be more accurate in what I say when I say it, so that you walk away going, oh, he really knows what he's talking about, and so forth, as opposed to, I need to question what he just said. Let me go find, 30 other people who say he's full of whatever.
Yeah. Powerful brevity, right? And ironically, AI can help us with that in a lot of cases. Not necessarily telling, I'm not saying AI should give you the answers, but if you have, hey, this is what I'm trying to say, and you write like a verbose paragraph, AI is actually really good at distilling things down and saying, here's your main points, here's where you're trying to go. There are great uses for the technology. That happens to be one of them. I wouldn't ask it to answer the question and give you all the talking points too, because it may well not give you the right sources for those. But if you have all that sorted, it's really good at helping you distill it down to something that's valuable and useful. And I think you make a good point, because people don't have time. Everything's about fast. So the faster you can pour enough for the right things into people's brains in 15 to 30 seconds, that's about what you're going to get. And maybe that ends up being the new war we have in politics over messaging, is how fast can you pour your message into somebody's brain and have all the facts in place, or at least your version of the facts in place, and what's going to be more compelling. Campaigning is going to get all the more interesting. Maybe at least we'll get shorter campaign commercials as a result, but I doubt it. But it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. So listen, I got a question. I know we're going to run up on time here, but we've talked about a lot of negatives, frankly. Like, it's a scary world of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and all these horrible things that are happening. What about the good? Like, we talked a little bit, at least, about technologies that might help detect some of these things, and some of our human capabilities for detecting things, the ability to have critical thinking and some of the structures in place, but do you see anything positive coming out of the generative AI space, and AI slop is going to get better? Obviously, it's going to be less messy. What do we see as some positives are going to come out of this that won't be hostile to us and ruin the world?
Yeah, well, I use it for rapid iteration of things. I will test out ideas. To your point, look at phrasing. Can I get this more concise? I can do this very rapidly with AI. So in my day to day work, there is a purpose and a place for it. What we're talking about is potentially malicious. Oftentimes it's not. It's just done for the fun of it, for the lulls, as we would say in the hacker world, and and with interesting results. When you start taking like celebrities, or when you start taking people in the public space, we need to probably regulate that a little more, so that just because I'm a celebrity doesn't mean you can change what I'm saying and doing. I know Martin Luther King's daughter came out recently and said, "Stop putting words in his mouth. They were pretty good from the first time he said them." So, you know, we we probably as a society are in the in between times with this technology. And hopefully, as we've done with other technologies, we've steered the ship, maybe not as fast as we could have, but we've steered it through all the potentials. And we continue to use these technologies. You mentioned vinyl versus CDs. I'm a CD person. I know Gen Z loves vinyl. And so it doesn't mean that these technologies go away, they just get consumed differently. And we're kind of in that in between time with AI and how we choose to consume AI going forward.
Yeah, I think there's some good points in there. Copywriting is going to be a challenge, right? You mentioned, AI. I mean, I know there's been actors and writers, the writers guilds that have had issues with that. I know certainly we've started, like I said, performers have started to say, hey, listen, you can't use my face and my image and everything and just, you got to pay me for this stuff, right? So we're going to figure that out. And there's huge lawsuits against companies that have been training these LLMs. And you find out they've been using all sorts of copywritten material that's going to be very hard to even prove. Yeah, I know you're in there. And it's very hard to prove, right? Because, they use 28 million, items or whatever. So how do you find yours in there? And if so, what's the fraction that you're entitled to for your copyright? Like, how do you even figure out what the value is for that? And also, how do you figure out after the fact? You're fighting this massive conglomerate that's already done it. Like the horse is out of the barn. They've taken this content, they've ingested it, they've done what they're going to do with it. We have no idea, publicly speaking, at least, what's in all these LLMs and how these AIs are being trained, or just how much content was copywritten that was used. And so all those things are going to be challenges. But I think, in talking about some of the positives, like you said, using it for iteration, I use AI brainstorming. Again, I do a lot of things that are independent. When I'm alone in a room, that's fine if I have an idea. But if I don't have an idea, that's a really big problem. Just sitting around thinking of ideas is sometimes the hardest part, not actually executing on something. So AI is great for that. You can ask it any stupid question, frankly. And even if it gives you a stupid answer, it's something. Like, it's something to start with. Like, okay, that's dumb, but now I got an idea of another idea. And so I've used it a lot just for ideas. Hey, I need blog ideas. All right, well, here's some concepts. And it'll kick out a bunch of ideas. And, 80% of them are crap. But there's some that are good. And you're like, oh, hey, I can dig into this and start doing some research. So I love them for that. They, for that piece and iteration and some editing work is really good. I guess I've started playing with the generative. I was going to say genetic, the generative AI portion for videos and trying to figure out what can be done there. There's some interesting pieces there. And then I'm actually in the debate right now of, do I do this with a digital doppelganger that looks like me? And if so, do I identify it or just let it run and let people think this is me doing it because it is my content? Or do I do it with something that's clearly an artificial entity so everybody knows I'm not trying to fool anybody? I just want to get the content on. I haven't figured out where the ethics are on that. So, I mean, there are some good pieces. I know we're seeing a lot in platforms, where it's easing the ability to find data, right? To when you can search a platform in natural language and it can find and consolidate things for you, or it can help you work through processes and structures. So I mean, there's some really good things going on here. And again, I think AI will probably be used to detect AI. We're already seeing that. This is that technological war we're going to see there. So it isn't all terrible, but I got to be honest. I worry about the loss of truth. This post-truth world that I started this conversation with is a big fear of mine. I think people move very, very quickly. We don't have a lot of critical thinking going on. It's not taught, and we don't have time. Frankly, people consume at such high rates of speed. Platforms are not designed to give you what you need. They're designed to give you what you want, as you said, the algorithm, and to keep you there. So they're not necessarily the arbitrators of truth or facts. They're about content. They're about engagement. So I worry about how those pieces are going to be there. So I guess I'm hopeful the technologies that are detecting these things and the people behind them and the motives are still going to outweigh the negatives here. But right now we're dealing in a significantly negative space. And this is the most powerful technology I've seen in my lifetime, even more so than the internet, I think, in that it can affect almost anybody everywhere in almost all industries. And it's been unleashed without guardrails and without a lot of understanding, even from the people developing it. You have developers who come back and go, oh yeah, it turns out, OpenAI said a while ago, yeah, it's overly sycophantic. We didn't expect that. That's a big problem. AI will tell you you're right on anything. You can give it the dumbest thing ever, and at worst, it'll say, that's a really interesting idea. I've never seen anybody think quite that way. Instead of saying, that's insane. That is crazy and wrong and provably false. And that's a real problem I think we have to work on. But I think they're improving some of those things. So there's some positives in there, but it's a scary time still.
I think there are guardrails, and it comes back to the human factor in that people's tastes will change. People will not like certain things that are done, and companies will realize that this is a lost leader for them. They can't continue to go down this path because the audience has turned against them for whatever reason. And I think this happens, and we just have to figure this out in this period of time right now with this new technology. To your point, it is scarier than earlier ones, but people said the same about the internet too. So we weathered through that, and we are using the internet right now. So it has its advantages. They will come through, and I think we'll figure out what of AI we want to take forward and what we dismiss. Because, to your point, a lot of these companies are getting money to try different ideas, and at the end of the day, the money is going to dry up on those ideas that don't actually help people, don't actually further any cause. So I think over time, this will shake out. It's just a question of how long we have to be in this period. And then something else is going to come along. Like, let's do a whole show on quantum computing. Oh, wait. Okay.
Yes. I've done some work on that area. That's still a bit above me, but you make good points. The technologies, cars obviously made us faster, made us go further, but it also produced, pollution. There's a negative. You say the same for air travel, right? Yeah, exactly. Auto crashes. I don't think horse crashes were nearly as fatal. We had, as you said, the internet. There's a lot of negatives that have gone along with it, but obviously there's a lot of positives. I do almost all my work on the internet. So do you. So pretty much every technology we've had goes on this path. Even nuclear technology. Nuclear energy is amazing. Nuclear war is horrific. So we've seen that. Nuclear medicine is another big thing. So I think you're right in that regard. There's a lot of positives here. It's just a scary time, and we're in the middle of it right now. Actually, we're in the early stages of it right now. And it's just been launched out there, and there's so much money. And I hate to say, I think you're probably right. I always hate when the answer is, well, the free market will figure it out. Things that are profitable will survive, and things that aren't won't. I don't love that philosophy necessarily, but I don't think you're wrong either. That, if there's a market for it, it'll last. I just worry if the market ends up being a more nefarious market than usual. But it's interesting, and right now I think, the pieces are, again, it's human intervention. There's some technologies. It's taking a beat, taking a moment. That's very hard to do. We're all in a hurry. It's also very hard to do if you're in the journalism space and your job is to get things out quickly. Because if you take a moment and 600 stories are ahead of you, your story doesn't matter anymore. Even if it's right, who's going to read it, right? And at best, you're trying to fight back the 400 things ahead of you that were completely inaccurate and the 200 that were close or whatever. And so speed's part of the equation. But I think it does come down to people. I think you're right, and we have the chance to identify these things. Going back to that car show video, right? The first time I looked through it, I was amazed, and like you said, you go through it the second time, you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's a head just floating around in the background. That's interesting. I wouldn't have expected to see that. And you start realizing, oh, this hand has 6 fingers on it, and it just takes that extra moment to go, okay, it's not quite there, but they're going to continue to get better. And then we'll see what the moments are. And it gets more into a contextual analysis, I think, as opposed to just the content itself of, does this make sense? What's the motive behind this? Why is this happening? And some things we'll just never know. I think car shows, you could do a whole fake video on car shows in a couple of years. And I wouldn't imagine anybody has a reason to lie. So I'd probably just believe it and just move along. Unless they just loved one car company and hated all the others. You start going, well, that's odd. So I think we're going to have a lot of human aspects to it, I suppose.
Well, this has been an engaging conversation, as always. And if you've enjoyed this, tune into our other shows, because we often have guests that talk about OSINT and relevant matters. We'll do that with the next episode. So you can find out what we're up to and where we're going by visiting us at authenticate.com/needlestack. That's authentic with the number 8.com/needlestack. And there you can find all our previous shows and transcripts, and you can leave feedback as to how we're doing. Maybe you don't like these episodes where AJ and I talk to each other. Maybe you love them better than having guests. I don't know. So, poke us for a while and share your opinions. The other place you can do that is on social media. We're all over the place. You can find us at Needlestack Pod and on all the platforms, and there, like us or respond to us, get into a grok war with us. I don't know. But more importantly, wherever you're consuming the show today, subscribe. It's important to us to keep going, to know that there's subscribers out there, but also, we don't want you to miss the new episodes that we produce. So this is a great way to find out. We're tracking at every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, you can expect to see a new episode from us. And who knows, maybe in the future, we'll have merch. No.
Yeah, if people want it, I'm sure we can put it together. Like I said, the market demands, right? So whatever people are looking for. No, I echo what you said. I appreciate everybody taking the time to tune in and to listen and to watch and to provide feedback. Unless you don't like the show, and then I don't want to hear it. But no, please, spread the word and let us know. This is about you. This is about the audience. It's about guests when we have them. It's not about Rob and myself. We just want to make sure we're providing things that are interesting and informative and entertaining and valuable. People's time matters. So thank you, everybody. Every bit of your time matters to us, and thank you for taking that time to listen to us and to watch us. And hopefully, this has been valuable to you. So with that in mind, I think we can close it up and let people go on with the rest of their days and their lives. Rob, anything else from you?
Nope, we're good.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Appreciate it. This has been another episode of Needlestack.